My kitchen smelled like roasted garlic and rosemary, the chicken nearly done in the oven, when Mark called out from the living room, "Hey honey, guess what? My old college buddy Jake is in town and he's joining us for dinner." Great, just what I needed. A last-minute guest when I was already up to my elbows in mashed potatoes. I plastered on a smile and yelled back, "Sounds great, babe." Jake arrived not long after, and wow, talk about making an entrance. He was tall, exuding that effortless confidence that made people instantly gravitate towards him. His grin could have sold ice to an Eskimo. As they fell into their nostalgic banter, swapping stories about their wild college escapades, I couldn't help but notice how Mark lit up around him. It was like seeing a side of my husband I hadn't seen in years, a bit of envy, a lot of admiration. Dinner was a mix of Jake's enthralling travel tales and Mark's occasional wistful sighs. Jake had been everywhere, done everything. He talked about trekking through the Andes, surfing in Australia, and even some slightly shady escapades in Southeast Asia. I could see Mark soaking it all in, probably wishing he'd had even half those adventures. It was hard not to be captivated, even for me. Jake had this knack for making every story sound like the adventure of a lifetime. After dinner, Mark suggested we play cards. I groaned internally, but we settled in for a game. As the night wore on, the vibe became more relaxed, the laughter more genuine. There was something about Jake, maybe the way he made even mundane card games feel thrilling, that made it hard not to get drawn in. And somewhere between the second bottle of wine and Mark's terrible attempts at bluffing, I felt it. That odd, inexplicable connection with Jake, something deeper than just the charm and the stories. By the time we called it a night, Jake thanked us profusely for dinner, mentioning he'd be around for a while. Of course, Mark, in his infinite hospitality, insisted Jake crash with us instead of a hotel. Jake hesitated, but Mark was persistent. So, with a bit more convincing, Jake agreed. I wasn't sure how I felt about this new house guest but figured it was temporary. The next day, Jake made himself right at home. It was like having a house guest and a handyman rolled into one. He fixed the leaky faucet that had been driving me nuts for weeks, cooked us dinner one night, some exotic dish he picked up on his travels, and generally injected this weirdly positive energy into our household. It was refreshing and a little unsettling how quickly he became part of our daily routine. One evening, Mark had to pull a late shift, leaving Jake and me alone. We decided to watch a movie. It was supposed to be a casual, mindless distraction, but somewhere between the opening credits and the climax, things shifted. The air between us grew thick with unspoken words and lingering glances. There was no denying the tension, and it scared the hell out of me. This was Mark's best friend, for crying out loud. Yet here we were, inches apart on the couch, the lines of friendship blurring faster than I could keep up with. I knew I should get up, create some distance, but I stayed. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was the thrill of the forbidden. As the credits rolled and Jake turned to me, his eyes held a question, one I wasn't ready to answer. I felt my heart racing, caught in this precarious dance between loyalty and temptation. The night had taken a turn I hadn't anticipated, and I was left wondering where it would lead us. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking a tightrope over a pit of fire. The night Jake and I nearly kissed lingered in my mind, making it hard to focus on anything else. Every glance, every casual touch seemed loaded with unspoken tension. And with Mark working late more often, Jake and I were spending more time together. It was on one of those nights, after we'd had a few glasses of wine, that the dam finally broke. We started out talking about nothing, favorite movies, travel stories. Then, without warning, our conversation shifted. Jake started sharing more personal stories, and before I knew it, I was doing the same. It was like a confessional with no priest, just two sinners indulging in their secrets. I didn't realize how close we'd gotten until he was right there, inches from my face. His eyes locked onto mine, and before I could react, he kissed me. Every rational thought flew out the window. I kissed him back, letting the moment swallow us whole. It was wrong. Every fiber of my being knew it, but the pull was too strong to ignore. The next morning, guilt hit me like a ton of bricks. I could barely look at myself in the mirror, let alone face Jake. I avoided him all day, hoping to somehow erase the memory. But Jake, being Jake, wouldn't let it go. He cornered me in the kitchen, his expression a mix of determination and vulnerability. "We need to talk about last night," he said, and there was no escaping it. He admitted his feelings for me, and I was torn. My loyalty to Mark and the undeniable attraction to Jake were at war. I tried to distance myself, told Jake we needed to stop, but he was persistent. His charm was like a magnet, pulling me back into his orbit no matter how hard I tried to escape. We started sharing stolen moments whenever Mark was away, and the secrecy only added to the thrill. But it didn't take long for Jake's presence to affect my marriage. Mark noticed my distracted behavior and asked if something was wrong. I lied, blaming stress from work, but the guilt was like a constant weight, pressing down on me. Despite my best efforts, I couldn't end the affair. Jake's persistence won out every time. We found ways to be together without arousing suspicion, and each encounter was more intense than the last. The thrill of the forbidden was addictive. One night, Mark went out with friends, giving Jake and me a rare opportunity. We took a risky chance, and just when things were getting dangerously close, Mark came home earlier than expected. The sheer panic in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever felt. We barely managed to cover our tracks, but the close call only made the affair more dangerous and thrilling. Every day felt like a balancing act, one misstep away from disaster. The guilt, the fear, the excitement, it was a chaotic mix that left me constantly on edge. I knew it couldn't last, but I was too deep to pull myself out. It was a picture-perfect weekend afternoon, and the smell of sizzling barbecue filled the air. Mark, in his typical social butterfly mode, had invited another friend over for a get-together. Enter Tom, the polar opposite of Jake, quieter, more observant, and unsettlingly perceptive. From the moment he arrived, I could feel his eyes flicking between Jake and me, picking up on the slightest hints of tension. As the evening went on, Tom's curiosity grew more evident. He asked probing questions, subtly veiled as casual conversation. "So, Jake, how's the nomadic life treating you? Ever think about settling down? And to me, how do you manage with Mark working late so often? Must get pretty lonely." His words were like little fishing lines, trying to hook any secrets lurking beneath the surface. At one point, Tom pulled me aside, his tone filled with genuine concern. "Is everything all right, really? You seem off." I brushed him off with a forced laugh and a lame excuse about work stress, but his penetrating gaze told me he wasn't buying it. Great, just what I needed, a human lie detector. Over the next few days, Tom's visits became more frequent. Sometimes he came with Mark, other times alone. It was like he had moved in without actually moving in. His constant presence was a ticking time bomb, making it increasingly difficult for Jake and me to steal any private moments. Every glance felt like it was being scrutinized, every word weighed. Then came the afternoon I'd been dreading. Alone in the kitchen, Tom cornered me. "I know about you and Jake," he said, his voice low and direct. Panic surged through me, but before I could protest, he held up a hand. "I'm not going to tell Mark. But you need to be more careful. You're playing with fire." He offered his help, suggesting ways to manage the situation. His tone was calm, almost too calm, and I felt trapped. Tom's knowledge of our affair gave him an unsettling power over me. I reluctantly agreed to his advice, hoping it would keep the affair under wraps and avoid any confrontation. But his involvement only complicated things further. He seemed to relish his new role, subtly manipulating situations to his advantage. Whenever he was around, I felt like a puppet with invisible strings. Jake, naturally suspicious, started noticing Tom's behavior. Their interactions grew tense, like two alpha wolves circling each other. Jake's frustration was palpable, and the tension between him and Tom crackled in the air. It was a bizarre love triangle. No, a control triangle, with Tom pulling the strings, Jake chafing under the restrictions, and me caught in the middle. Each day felt like walking a tightrope over a bed of nails. The thrill of the affair had given way to a constant state of anxiety. I was always looking over my shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The secrecy, the lies, the manipulation, it was all spiraling out of control. In a rare moment of solitude, I found myself wondering how the hell I got here. A few months ago, my biggest worry was burning dinner. Now, I was living a soap opera, complete with illicit romance and a scheming antagonist. I knew I needed to find a way out, but every option seemed fraught with peril. The stakes were too high, and the web of deceit too tangled. And so, the tightrope walk continued, with no end in sight. Each step precarious, each moment fraught with danger. One wrong move, and everything would come crashing down. It's amazing how quickly life can transform into a twisted game of cat and mouse. With Tom's manipulative hand in our affairs, Jake and I had to be sneakier than ever. The thrill of secrecy morphed into a heavy paranoia. Every shared glance, every brushed touch felt like walking on a minefield, with Tom holding the detonator. Mark, blissfully ignorant of the actual dynamics at play, began to lean on Tom more. He sought his advice on everything, deepening the snare I found myself in. Tom had seamlessly inserted himself into our lives, becoming the puppeteer pulling all our strings. The irony wasn't lost on me. Mark trusted the very person who was orchestrating our downfall. Then came Tom's masterstroke. A weekend trip to a cabin in the woods. "It'll be great to relax and reconnect," he suggested, a sinister glint in his eyes that only I seemed to notice. Mark was ecstatic about the idea, and despite my gut screaming in protest, I had no choice but to go along. The cabin trip was a masterclass in false camaraderie. On the surface, it was all smiles and laughter, but beneath that thin veneer, Tom wielded his power with subtle precision. He dropped hints about the affair, little jabs that only I could understand, keeping me on edge. Every time I thought I could breathe, he found a way to remind me who was in control. On the second night, Tom set his trap. He orchestrated a scenario where Mark found Jake and me in what could be seen as a compromising position. It was innocent enough to be explained away, a misplaced hand, a shared blanket, but the damage was done. The seed of doubt was planted in Mark's mind, and I saw the flicker of suspicion in his eyes. After the trip, Mark's behavior shifted. He grew distant, his warm affection replaced by cold scrutiny. He watched me, questioned my every move, and the strain on our marriage was almost unbearable. Maintaining a facade of normalcy became a Herculean task. Every word, every action was second-guessed, and the guilt gnawed at me from the inside out. Jake, feeling the immense pressure, suggested we end the affair. He wanted to protect my marriage, but I couldn't bring myself to let him go. Our relationship had become my escape from the increasingly complicated mess my life had become. The more chaotic my world got, the more I clung to Jake. It was like being caught in a whirlpool, knowing I should swim away but unable to resist the pull. As I navigated this treacherous path, my mind was a constant battlefield. I questioned every decision, every word spoken. Dark humor became my shield, a way to cope with the madness. "Of course, let's trust Tom," I'd think sarcastically, because what could possibly go wrong? But the reality was, everything was going wrong. My marriage was hanging by a thread, my affair was on the verge of collapse, and the puppet master, Tom, was enjoying every minute of our turmoil. The tension was palpable, the stakes higher than ever, and I was running out of moves. I knew I needed to find a way out, to regain control of my life. But with every step I took, the web tightened around me. The thrill of the forbidden had turned into a nightmare of deceit and manipulation. And I was left wondering how much longer I could keep this charade going before everything came crashing down. When I saw Mark pacing the living room, his face a storm of frustration and confusion, I knew something was off. He'd been distant since the cabin trip, but this was different. He finally confided in Tom, who, pretending to be the concerned friend, suggested hiring a private investigator. Mark, desperate for the truth, reluctantly agreed. The irony of Tom's betrayal was like a cruel joke, one that only I was privy to. The investigator's presence went unnoticed at first. Jake and I carried on, blissfully ignorant that our every move was being meticulously documented. We continued our affair, finding solace in each other amidst the chaos. But it was only a matter of time before our fragile world came crashing down. The day of reckoning arrived when the investigator presented his findings to Mark. He was devastated. The confrontation was nothing short of explosive. Mark's face twisted with anger and betrayal as he hurled the evidence at me, each photograph and report a dagger to my heart. The room spun as he confronted Jake and me, his voice raw with hurt. Our secret was out, and the consequences were as severe as I had feared. Mark demanded Jake leave immediately. Their friendship, once so solid, was now shattered. Jake packed his things without a word, leaving me to face the wreckage of my actions alone. The silence that followed his departure was suffocating, a tangible reminder of the damage I had caused. In the days that followed, Mark and I barely spoke. Our home, once filled with warmth and laughter, now echoed with a tense silence. The occasional arguments that broke the quiet were bitter and filled with accusations. Trust, once the foundation of our relationship, was now a distant memory. I didn't know if we could ever repair it. Tom, ever the opportunist, continued to insert himself into our lives. Now, as Mark's confidant, he suggested couples therapy. His presence was a constant reminder of my mistakes, his manipulations adding salt to the already deep wounds. But despite my resentment towards him, I agreed to therapy, clinging to the hope that it might salvage what was left of my marriage. The therapy sessions were brutal. They forced me to confront the depth of my betrayal and the impact it had on Mark. Each session was a grueling exercise in vulnerability and honesty. I bared my soul, revealing the darkest parts of myself in the hope that we could find a way forward. Mark's pain was palpable, his every word a testament to the hurt I had caused. Through it all, a part of me couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of irony. Here we were, trying to rebuild our lives under the watchful eye of the very man who had orchestrated our downfall. Tom's manipulative hand was everywhere, yet I had no choice but to play along. The stakes were too high, and the web of deceit too tangled to simply walk away. Every day was a struggle, a tightrope walk over a bed of nails. But despite the odds, I clung to the hope that we could somehow emerge from this stronger. The journey was far from over, and the road ahead was fraught with challenges. But for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of determination. I had to believe that we could rebuild, that the pieces of our shattered lives could be reassembled into something new. The therapy room felt like a battlefield. Each session was a minefield of emotions, and every word was a potential explosion. But there we were, Mark and I, trudging through the muck of our past mistakes. It was exhausting, draining, but amidst the pain, there was a faint glimmer of hope. Slowly, painfully, we began to communicate more openly. It was as if we were excavating our relationship from beneath the rubble. One session, Mark laid bare the depth of his pain and betrayal. His voice cracked as he described how my actions had shattered his trust. Hearing his side was like a knife to the heart. I had known I hurt him, but understanding the full extent of the damage was a pivotal moment for me. It was the slap of reality I needed, a stark reminder of the person I didn't want to be. Outside therapy, I threw myself into repairing our marriage. I cut off all contact with Jake, a painful but necessary step. My focus shifted entirely to Mark and regaining his trust. Every gesture, every word was a conscious effort to show my commitment. It was like learning to walk again, one hesitant step at a time. Tom's influence, once so pervasive, began to wane. As Mark and I grew closer, he started to see through Tom's manipulations. It was as if a fog was lifting. Mark's loyalty to our marriage strengthened, and Tom's grip loosened. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. One evening, Mark and I sat down for a long, overdue conversation about our future. We acknowledged the mistakes and the pain, but also recognized the love that still existed between us. It was raw, it was honest, and it was a turning point. For the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope. To cement our newfound commitment, we decided to take a vacation together, away from all the chaos. It was an opportunity to reconnect, to rediscover each other without the shadow of the past hanging over us. The idea of escaping our reality, even if just for a little while, was a beacon of light in our turbulent sea. The vacation was a success. We spent our days exploring new places, basking in each other's company, and rebuilding the bond that had been damaged. It was a reminder of why we fell in love in the first place, a glimpse of the life we could have if we continued to work at it. The journey was far from over. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight, and scars don't heal instantly. But we were on the road to redemption, and for the first time, I believed we had a real chance. The tightrope walk had turned into a path, still narrow and treacherous, but a path nonetheless. And for now, that was enough. Coming home from our vacation, the reality of our everyday lives was daunting, but we were determined to keep the momentum going. We established new routines, carving out time for each other amidst the chaos of daily life. It wasn't always smooth sailing. The road was still rocky, with occasional setbacks, but we were committed. Communication became our new mantra, and though it felt awkward at times, it was the glue that started to mend our broken trust. I knew I needed a fresh start, something to help distance myself from the mess of the past. So, I found a new job. The new environment was like a breath of fresh air, offering renewal and a much-needed sense of opportunity. It was strange, almost surreal, to not be constantly reminded of my mistakes at every corner. The change helped me focus on the future rather than wallow in the past. Mark and I decided to renovate our home, transforming it into a project we could tackle together. It was surprisingly therapeutic. Every brushstroke of paint, every piece of furniture we picked out, was a testament to our renewed commitment. Our home started to feel like ours again, a space reflecting our journey and our dedication to rebuilding. Tom's presence in our lives began to fade. Mark started to see the cracks in their friendship, realizing that Tom's advice had been more about control than genuine concern. It was liberating for both of us to distance ourselves from his manipulative influence. The more we pulled away, the clearer it became that we didn't need him to navigate our relationship. Then, one evening, Jake reached out. It was unexpected, to say the least. He wanted closure, to apologize for his part in the affair and acknowledge the pain it caused. It was a tense and emotional conversation. Mark and I listened, but it was clear, we needed to move forward without him. The final goodbye to Jake was bittersweet, marking the end of a tumultuous chapter and the beginning of a fresh start for our marriage. As the months passed, our efforts began to bear fruit. Trust, once shattered, was slowly being restored. The love between Mark and me grew stronger. We learned to appreciate each other in ways we hadn't before, valuing the hard-earned journey we had taken together. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was real, and it was ours. On our anniversary, Mark surprised me with a heartfelt letter. In it, he expressed his forgiveness and his hope for our future. Reading his words, I felt a wave of emotions, relief, gratitude, and an overwhelming sense of love. It was a poignant reminder of how far we had come, a testament to the love that had endured despite everything. We weren't the same people we had been before the affair. We were stronger, more resilient, and painfully aware of how fragile trust could be. But we had survived the storm, and now, standing on the other side, I felt a renewed sense of hope. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was real, and we were committed to making it work. The past was a scar, a reminder of our journey, but it no longer defined us. The future, uncertain and full of potential, was ours to shape together. Just as Mark and I began to settle into our new normal, life threw us a curveball. I discovered I was pregnant. The news hit me like a freight train. It was a confusing mix of joy, fear, and anxiety about the future. After everything we'd been through, this was the last thing I expected, and my mind swirled with questions and what-ifs. Mark's reaction was a mix of cautious optimism. He was supportive but understandably wary, given our recent rollercoaster of a relationship. We decided that the best way to navigate this new chapter was with the help of our therapist. The sessions became a safe space to air out our fears and hopes, focusing on preparing for parenthood while addressing any lingering issues from our past. Therapy was challenging but necessary. We talked about our expectations, our fears, and how we would handle the inevitable stress of a newborn. Each session was a reminder of how far we had come and how much work we still had ahead of us. But it also gave us a renewed sense of purpose, a common goal to strive towards. The impending arrival of our child was a beacon of hope, pulling us closer together. As my pregnancy progressed, Mark and I found a new rhythm. We spent hours discussing baby names, decorating the nursery, and imagining our future as parents. It was strange and beautiful to see Mark so excited, his cautious demeanor melting away with each ultrasound and baby kick. We were finding joy in the little things, and it felt like we were building something solid and beautiful together. We decided to host a small gathering to celebrate the upcoming arrival of our child. It was a chance to reconnect with friends and family, to reaffirm the support network that had helped us through our darkest times. The house buzzed with laughter and warmth, a stark contrast to the tension that had once filled it. And then, just as things were looking up, Tom made an unexpected appearance. The air in the room changed as he walked in. It was uncomfortable, to say the least. He approached us with a look of genuine remorse, his eyes downcast as he apologized for his manipulations. It was clear he was seeking forgiveness and closure. Mark and I listened to Tom's apology, and while it was hard to forget the past, we appreciated his attempt to make amends. It was a moment of closure, a chance to finally put that chapter behind us. Accepting his apology didn't erase the pain, but it allowed us to let go of the lingering resentment. It was a necessary step in moving forward. With Tom's apology behind us, we returned to the celebration, the weight of the past lifting slightly off our shoulders. As the evening wore on, I found myself reflecting on our journey. From the depths of betrayal and manipulation to this moment of tentative peace, it had been a hell of a ride. But here we were, stronger and more united than ever, ready to face whatever challenges life threw our way next. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely hopeful. Our baby was a symbol of our resilience and our ability to rebuild. Mark and I had survived the storm, and now, standing together, we were ready to embrace the future with open arms. I was jolted awake by the sharp cry of our newborn, piercing the pre-dawn silence. The arrival of our baby had brought immense joy and a renewed sense of purpose, but it also came with a heap of sleepless nights and constant demands. Parenthood was no joke. Mark and I stumbled through those early days in a haze of exhaustion, but there was an undeniable bond growing stronger between us with each bleary-eyed smile and whispered word of encouragement. The nights were the hardest. I'd sit in the nursery, rocking our baby back to sleep, and think about how far we'd come. Every yawn-inducing feeding and diaper change was a reminder of the promises we made to each other, to rebuild, to be stronger. There were moments when patience wore thin, but those challenges only reinforced our commitment. We'd grown resilient, finding ways to support each other and tackle this new adventure as a united front. Therapy became our lifeline again, this time focusing on parenting and keeping our relationship healthy amidst the chaos. It was like having a map in uncharted territory. Our therapist provided invaluable tools and insights, helping us navigate this phase without losing sight of ourselves or each other. I couldn't help but think how different things might have been if we hadn't committed to working through our issues. Determined not to let our romance fizzle out, Mark and I made a conscious effort to keep the spark alive. We scheduled regular date nights, a mix of cozy nights in and occasional evenings out. Finding those moments to connect, to just be us, was essential. It was a reminder that while we were parents now, we were also partners, lovers, and best friends. Watching our child grow was a joy like no other. We made family time a cherished routine, filled with laughter, love, and the simple pleasure of watching our little one discover the world. We became those parents who take endless photos and videos, capturing every giggle and milestone. It felt like building a tapestry of memories, each thread woven with care and love. Our friends and family played a crucial role in this journey. They offered advice, babysitting, and sometimes just a sympathetic ear when things got tough. Their support created a safety net that made the challenges of parenthood a little less daunting. I often found myself marveling at the community we had around us, grateful for every bit of help and companionship. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Mark turned to me with that familiar twinkle in his eye. "What do you think about renewing our vows?" he asked. The idea was perfect. A symbolic gesture of our renewed commitment, a testament to the strength of our love despite everything we'd faced. We planned a small, intimate ceremony, inviting only our closest friends and family. It was simple but beautiful. Standing there, surrounded by loved ones, we promised to cherish and support each other anew, embracing the future with hope and determination. The vow renewal was more than just a ceremony. It was a celebration of our journey, a nod to our past, and a hopeful gaze towards our future. As we exchanged vows, I felt a wave of emotions, gratitude, love, and an unshakable belief in our resilience. We had faced some dark times, but standing there with Mark, I knew we could handle whatever came next. The future was ours to shape, one step at a time, and I was ready to walk that path hand in hand with the man I loved. It's funny how life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. Just when I thought the most dramatic chapters of our lives were behind us, Mark and I found ourselves facing a whole new set of challenges, this time, as a unified front. With our past finally put to rest and a bright future ahead, we turned our focus to building a lasting legacy for our family. Investing in our child's education and future became a top priority. We wanted to ensure they had the best opportunities, so we enrolled them in the best schools and extracurricular activities. Every parent-teacher conference, every science fair project, every piano recital, these became the milestones of our lives. I found a new kind of joy in these moments, a stark contrast to the turmoil we had once known. We also decided to become more involved in our community. We participated in local events, supported causes that resonated with us, and found fulfillment in giving back. Volunteering at the local shelter, organizing neighborhood cleanups, and participating in charity runs became our new normal. It was amazing how these small acts of kindness strengthened our family bonds and gave us a sense of purpose. As the years passed, our marriage grew even stronger. We faced new challenges and adventures together, always holding on to the lessons we had learned and the love that had endured. We traveled to places we had always dreamed of visiting, created memories that would last a lifetime, and constantly reminded ourselves of how far we had come. Our child grew up in a loving and supportive environment, witnessing firsthand the strength of our relationship. They saw the importance of forgiveness, commitment, and resilience. It was heartwarming to see them thrive, knowing that our efforts had paid off. We had become a testament to the idea that even the most broken things could be mended with love and determination. In our twilight years, Mark and I often found ourselves reflecting on our journey. Sitting on our porch, watching the sunset, we talked about the affair, a painful chapter that had somehow been a catalyst for growth and transformation. It was a part of our story, but it no longer defined us. We had built a life filled with love, trust, and an unbreakable bond that had withstood the test of time. One evening, as we sat there, I couldn't help but marvel at the life we had created. We had faced our demons, rebuilt our relationship from the ground up, and come out stronger on the other side. The scars were still there, but they were a testament to our resilience. "Remember when we thought we'd never get through it?" I said, a hint of sarcasm in my voice. "And look at us now. Who would have thought?" Mark chuckled, squeezing my hand. "We did it together," he said simply. And he was right. Together, we had turned a story of betrayal and pain into one of redemption and love. Our legacy was one of strength, forgiveness, and unwavering commitment. And as we faced the future, whatever it held, I knew we would continue to walk this path side by side, just as we always had. Life had tested us in ways we never imagined, but in the end, it had also rewarded us with a love that was deeper and more enduring than anything I could have hoped for. And that, I realized, was the true legacy we had built, one that would last for generations to